an amazing story, the story of Yitzhak Kaduri. Yitzhak was a 108-year-old rabbi.
When he died.
When he died. And tell us this story. This is just an amazing, incredible story. And how you came about to discover it and what led you to write this book.
Okay, well, I'll start with your second question, and thank you again, Rabbi Eric, for having me on your program. And yes, varying sources have him listed at from 103 to 108 at his death, over 100 years old. Let me back up and answer the question, how did I come across this story? Well, the story, and I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself, but I'll bring it all back in perspective. The story broke on the internet in 2007. And there's a very pointed reason why it did. And it broke out of Israel. It was reported in News First Class and Israel Today, the two publications that come right out of Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Israel, in that area. Excuse me. So I was really involved in internet ministry then, and just beginning the network that I had formed called the PNN News and Ministry Network, and came across this story, did a little background research on it, and thought, wow, this is amazing. And you know, and I trusted News First Class and Israel Today for their journalistic integrity, and everything seemed to square up. And so I started doing some research. Well, I put a little video together and just a little documentary of those stories. And it went viral. I mean, 50, 60, 70,000 hits and views within days. But after a while, you know, I kind of rocked on with so many other things that were happening in the world. Well, in, I don't remember exactly when it was, 2000, good gracious, 14, 13, something like that. Joseph Farah, I had already written a book with WND Books. It had already become a bestseller. But he had been sparked by something in the news, I don't remember what it was, that related that story. He didn't know that I had developed this viral video about the story. He didn't know I was connected with it at all. But he began doing research on his own about the story. And he said, Carl, everywhere I went, I kept running into this video that was embedded into people's websites. And I would watch it, and it was the same video. And I would hear it, and I said, I know that voice. Where do I know that voice? Because I don't identify myself, and I'm not on camera. I'm just using my voice. And he said, finally, it dawned on me, that's Carl Gallups, my friend. And he said, I can't believe that you know so much about this already. So he called me, and he told me this, and he says, you've got to write a book on this. He says, because the world needs to know this story. It's astounding. And he said, there's not a book anywhere out there on this story, and people need to know. He said particularly Jews, but Christians as well.
Right.
Well, so that's how it began, and I said, well, I'll take it on. It's going to be a massive research project, and it'll be unlike anything I've ever written, because as you know, Rabbi Eric, and you've already alluded to it in your opening monologue, if you're going to reach the Jewish world, you can't be preachy. You can't present it as the gospel disguised in Jewish talk. The Jewish mind, generally speaking, and the scriptures bear this out, they want to rationalize it through. They want to debate it through. They want to see all the sides, all the possibilities. That's why, as you said, even in Israel now, there are rabbis saying, well, it could be him. It might be him. If it turns out to be him, who am I to say? But they don't say that lightly. They say that based upon the fact that they are continually researching this thing out. So what I determined to do was to write the book, to put it in journalistic format. In other words, an investigative journalistic case, but yet make certain that my doctrine and theology, when it was appropriate to display it, that it was solid. And so that's what I tried to do. Now, Joseph told me that when I wrote the book, that if he liked it, he would invest the money to put it in documentary movie format. And he did like it, and it was done. And now the book also has a companion movie produced by George Escobar, an award-winning film producer. In fact, he had a movie on the big screens all over the world in theaters, Alone But Not Alone. I think it was a couple of years ago. It was an amazing Christian film. But anyway, he produced it, and it's by the same title, A Rabbi That Found Messiah. Well, in the meantime, the book has been translated into 6 or 7 different languages. The movie has been subtitled in Hebrew and Spanish, and of course it's produced in English. I'm in the movie. It's a documentary. Jonathan Cahn is in the movie. So that's now there's a guy in Israel. I don't know if you're familiar with Messiah of Israel Ministries and Zev Porat, but he also is a dear friend of mine. He is using that book and that movie profusely, leading Orthodox Jews to Christ all over Israel. Now, the thing that Joseph Farah and I and Zev Porat, well, Zev Porat probably knew it because he's born and raised like you, was studying to be a rabbi and became a Christian and born and raised in the Hebrew culture.
Right.
But the thing that Joseph Farah and I didn't know was that the reaction to this book was going to be very emotional. There were people that were thrilled with the story. There were others that said, wow, this is interesting. I've never heard this before. They read it. They said, well, this is good. This is well written, well researched. I'm going to have to give it some thought. And then there were some who were furious that the story was told. And here's why. Well, first of all, it contradicts the teachings of the rabbis about Messiah.
Right.
And it comes from their most venerated rabbi in the history of modern Israel. So it's kind of hard to refute. So they set out to refute it and became very vitriolic in that. And I'll tell those stories as we move along. The other reason is that the Israeli media, once this thing was exposed that their most venerated rabbi had actually named Jesus as the Messiah, they shut the story down. And information was pulled off of websites. The media refused to report it. Now, we're talking about a rabbi. When he died, the president of Israel gave his eulogy. They had to shut the streets of Jerusalem down for 2 days. There were 300,000 people there. This is not some little rabbi shoved away in the corner somewhere.
Right.
This is a guy directly connected to Ariel Sharon. Benjamin Netanyahu knew him personally. And Benjamin Netanyahu, by the way, has my book and my movie given to him by Pat Boone, by the way. So anyway, so that's how I got involved. That's how it all unfolded. But okay, so on that October night in 2005, Itzhak Kaduri tells his congregation, I know who the Messiah is. I'm going to put his name in a note. I'm going to put it on my website 1 year after my death. And I also can tell you that Messiah will not come until Ariel Sharon has died. Well, within weeks, 12, 13, 14 weeks, early January, Ariel Sharon is in the hospital in a coma. We now know that he would never recover from that, and he would die 8 years later on a January, the same month, right, in the year 2014. But in the meantime, within weeks of that, in the same month of January 2006, Itzhak Kaduri winds up in the hospital with pneumonia. He never recovers, and he dies. Now, prior to that, his physicians and his family have attested, and I've got it in my book, he was in great health. I mean, for an 108-year-old, he was still preaching and teaching and doing all of these things. But here we now have January 2006, very, providential year and month. So Sharon is in a coma, Kaduri has passed, and now the world waits for a year. Well, you and I were talking off air about why that year is so important,
right?
And in the life of Jewish folks and Orthodox Jews, and so it was important in that tradition that it would be a year before they would, as you said, place the headstone, before they would put the note up, before people could talk or discuss about his teachings, his life, etc. That's Jewish tradition. So, right, so they waited. Well, January 2007, the note goes up. And it's written in, it was written in Hebrew, of course. And when you read it in English, it said this. It says, concerning the letter abbreviation of his name, well, his who? Well, the Messiah, because he said, I'm going to put the note up. It's going to tell you who the Messiah. It says, concerning the letter abbreviation of his name, he shall lead his people and reveal to them that the law is righteous. Something like that. It can be translated several different ways, but there it is. And that was all the note said. And of course, to the intellectual, Kabbalistic Jew, that was fine. because they didn't really expect him to have a name. Some were disappointed, but they thought, okay, well, he's describing the attributes of the Messiah. And so they put it up, and they kind of celebrated it and oohed and awed. These were some of the last known handwritings of this venerated rabbi. Israel Today ran a story on it. News First Class ran a story on it, etc. But within a month or two of that note being up there, students within his yeshiva, there were some that, unbeknownst to the rest of Israel, that he had been teaching them who Messiah was from the scriptures, and they knew who he was saying Messiah was. They were a little disappointed when they saw the note too at first, because they thought, well, surely, why would our teacher not just say the name like he did to us in the yeshiva? And then they looked at it again and they said, oh my gosh, he's written this in Kabbalah. He's written it in code, and he gives us the secret for decoding it in the first sentence, which said, concerning the letter abbreviation of his name. And then the next sentence was, it'd be like you put a comma, he shall lead his people and prove that the law is righteous, etc., etc. All right, now watch. That phrase that I just said in English consists of 6 Hebrew words. His students looked at those 6 Hebrew words and said, he told us to take the first letter of each of those words, the letter abbreviation. They took the first letter of each of those 6 Hebrew words, and it spelled perfectly Yehoshua, which is the long-form version of Yeshua, which is transliterated from Greek to Latin to English to Jesus. And there it was. There it was. And the students began to celebrate, the ones that knew this, and were pointing to it and said, look, it's on his website. He's telling the world that Jesus is Messiah. And, well, of course, his ministry and the Orthodox Jews heard this rambling. They went to the website. They saw the note, and they screamed, take that note down. Then they began claiming the note's a forgery. It's somebody put it there. It's a plant. It's a cruel trick. Some Christian has done this to us. But prior to the note being decoded, they were celebrating it as his, and they were talking about, look, it's in his handwriting. This is his note. We've kept it sealed. Like he said, we received it from him. We sealed it away. We put it up. Let's celebrate Rabbi Kaduri. But as soon as it was decoded, all of a sudden, it's a fake, it's a fraud, it's no good, it's a trick, take it down. I mean, that was their reaction. And you can imagine why, Pastor Eric, that would be tantamount to, in America, on Billy Graham's deathbed, he says, look, I had a visit from Messiah, and his name is Mohammed. You know, that's
absolutely.
In the Jewish mind, that's what was going on. They couldn't fathom it, that their Billy Graham of the Jewish world had just declared the name of the one for 2,000 years they had been trashing and proclaiming was a fake and a fraud and could not be the Messiah. Now, this was astounding. So now that's when it all hit in January of 2009. That's when the articles came out on the internet. That's when I made the first video, etc. Well, in the meantime, what happened then is that some years later, there was something else that happened. It had to do with, oh, I know what it was. There was a big headline in the news about Ariel Sharon might be waking from his coma.
Right. That's
when Joseph Farah got interested and started doing research and kept watching this video, hearing my voice, and then he called me up, as I said in the beginning, said, man, we got to write about this. What if Sharon wakes up? What if he doesn't wake up? You know, what if he dies? And nobody's written a book about this. The most famous rabbi in Israel's history has declared that the name of Messiah is Jesus. Now, look, I deal with the arguments in my book from the Orthodox Jews. They say, well, Yeshua is a very common name. In English, it'd be like saying John is the Messiah. Yeah, I get that. And I deal with this very honestly, very investigative. I used to be an investigator and a cop. For 10 years, I was in law enforcement. I came at it from a journalistic and investigative mind. And I deal with that. And I say, but here's the problem. Even though it is a common name, it is the only name associated with the only faith system in the world that comes from the Jewish faith that proclaims there is a Messiah named Yeshua. And so why in the world would he, if it wasn't the Jesus that you and I know from the scriptures, why would he even dare to do that? Of course, why would he dare to tarnish his name and legacy forever? But of course, he knew he would be with the Lord because the Lord had revealed that to him, so he didn't care. I mean, he was with Yeshua. So anyway, that's the story. But in the meantime, as I said, when he died, we'll go back to 2006, closed the streets of Jerusalem down. The president of Israel gives the eulogy. Dignitaries are there. 250,000, 300,000 people from all over Europe and Israel and everywhere flooding the streets. It's amazing. It's the biggest funeral, they said, in Israel's modern history. More so than for a president, a prime minister, anybody else. I mean, this guy's not just some little rabbi shoved away in the deep, dark alleys of Jerusalem somewhere. This guy is a world figure who has just been revealed to have proclaimed that the Messiah is Jesus. It shook the world. It rocked the world. To this day, Orthodox Jews, they read that. I mean, like I said, my friend Rabbi Zev Porat, Messianic Rabbi, he takes my book, he opens to the chapter, he lets them see the note, because I've got a picture of the note in the book. And then they look at it and they go, oh my gosh, how come we didn't know this? You mean our venerated rabbi? And if they were speaking English and if they were Christians in the United States, they would have said, you mean Billy Graham said this and we were not told? And then, where did you get this note? Where did you get this book? And he'll show them the book, he'll show them the movie, and he'll say, and he tells them, says, the media covered it up. It's, you know, I mean, now we know how the media covers up anything they want. Now this year has been a year of revelation in our own American politics of fake news and cover-ups and, and squelching what they don't want the people to hear. Well, that happened in Israel with this, because again, they're Billy Graham, just basically flushed down the toilet everything that the Orthodox Jews had been saying before. You know, not really, but because it all leads to that. But in their minds, that's the way it would have been. So anyway, so even to this day, but there are Jews coming to Christ now, because not only did this rabbi say it and do it, but now it's in a book. They can see it with their eyes. They can watch it in a movie. And there are about a dozen students that were under his teaching in the yeshiva that came to Christ, are out testifying. They're in video. They're on video. In fact, in the movie about my book, we've got several of them. You can hear them giving their testimonies in Hebrew, and it's being translated, and the translations are underneath in the words. Right. So it's just an amazing story, Rabbi Eric. It's amazing, and people are having to deal with it. And the general Orthodox Jewish reaction right now, those that are still absolutely opposed to Jesus, they say things like, well, he must have lost his mind. Well, but you can't verify that, because he was standing before his yeshiva in his perfect right mind when he said it, and he wrote the note in his perfect right mind and told his yeshiva what he was going to do. Then they say, well, the note was a fake, a fraud, a Christian trick. Well, how can that be? You were in possession of the note. You posted the note. You celebrated the note. You confirmed that it was his handwriting. The only time you denied all of that was when it was discovered that it was a code, and when you decoded it and the name Jesus was right there before your eyes. So then they say, oh, I've got Orthodox Jews mad at me for writing the book, for making the movie. There are organizations in Israel that, you know, that attack things like this, and I've been attacked, and Rabbi Porat has been attacked. So,
Yad Lachem is all over the place.